Now we will review polynomial long division. So we want to divide y squared minus 5y plus 6 by y minus 3. So the y minus 3 is going to go outside, and inside the division box is going to go y squared minus 5y plus 6. So what we want to ask ourselves is, what do I need to multiply y by to get y squared? And that is a y. And we want to take y and write it above the 5y. Then we take this y and distribute him to both the y and the negative 3. So we get y minus, erase that extra mark, y minus 3y. Now we need to change the signs and add these together. So we get negative 2y, and then we want to bring down the positive 6, and then we do the same thing over again. So we ask ourselves, what do we need to multiply y by to get a negative 2y? And that would be a negative 2. And then we distribute. So we get negative 2y plus 6. And then we change the signs and add, and we end up getting 0. So there is no remainder, and our final answer is y minus 2. For number 10, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to we're going to divide x squared plus 3x minus 28 by x minus 6. So x minus 6 is going to go on the outside. And x squared plus 3x minus 28 is going to go on the inside. And we're going to ask ourselves, what do we need to multiply x by to get an x squared? And that's just x. And then we distribute. So we get x squared minus 6x. And then we change the signs. And we add and get 9x. And drop down the negative 28. And then we ask ourselves, what do we need to multiply x by to get a 9x? And that will be a plus 9. And then we distribute to get 9x minus 54. And then we need to change the signs. And so now we have 54 minus 28, which is 26. So now 26 is going to be our remainder. So to do the remainder, we write a plus sign, and then we do 26 over what we were originally dividing by, which is x minus 6. So x plus 9 plus 26 over x minus 6 is the solution. Moving down to simplifying radical expressions and identifying the excluded values. So we have w plus 10 over w squared minus 100. So since we see w squared minus 100, we want to factor that. So we'll get w plus 10. And since this is difference of two squares, it factors into w plus 10 and w minus 10. And our w plus 10s cancel out. Remember, if the entire numerator cancels out, it's really a 1 left on top. So we're left with 1 over w minus 10. So now for the excluded values, we want to take a look at what we were not allowed to plug in before things were canceled. So we want to take w plus 10 and set it equal to 0, and w minus 10 and set it equal to 0. So after we solve, we get that we are not allowed to plug in a negative 10 for w or a positive 10. So moving over to the answer column, our simplified answer is 1 over w minus 10, and our excluded values are 10 and negative 10. Moving on to number 12, we have 250x cubed over 14x. So we want to think of a number that goes into 250 and 14, and I can think of the number 2. So we know that 2 goes into 150 125 times, and 2 goes into 14 7 times. Also, we see an x cubed on the top and a regular x on the bottom. So we can cancel this x with one of the x's, so this x will become an x squared. So our final answer is 125x squared all over 7. So now 7 doesn't go into 125, and we can't reduce it further, so that's the simplest form. So now going back to excluded values, we want to take the denominator and set it equal to 0. So we end up with x equals 0 as our excluded value. So in the answer column, we have 125x squared over 7, and our excluded value is 0. For our last problem, we have z squared minus 4z minus 45 over 3z squared plus 25z plus 50. So we want to try to factor this and see what will cancel. So if we factor the top, we need 2 parentheses. Oops. There we go. And we need a z and a z. 2 numbers that multiply to 45 are 5 and 9. 5 and 9 also can make a negative 4, but we need the 9 to be negative and the 5 to be positive. Now let's factor the bottom. So again, we need 2 parentheses, and we need a 3z and a 1z. So now we need to think of 2 numbers that multiply to 50. It would be nice if we were able to cancel one of the factors with the top. So I'm going to see if a 5 can go here and a 10 can go here. That's kind of a trick, because if I have a z plus 5 on top and a z plus 5 on the bottom, I'll be able to cancel. So let's do the smiley face method really quick to check and see if we guessed right. So in the middle we get a 10z, and on the outside we get a 15z, and that makes a 25z. So we know that we factored everything correctly. So now we know that the z plus 5s can cancel, and our final simplified version is z minus 9 all over 3z plus 10. Now going back to the excluded values, we want to take our 2 factors, three z plus 10 and z plus 5, and we want to set them equal to 0. So for our first factor, we get 3z equals negative 10. And when we divide by 3, we have z equals negative 10 thirds. So negative 10 thirds will be an excluded value. And if we subtract 5, we have z equals negative 5. So in the answer column, we have z minus 9 over 3z plus 10 as our simplified fraction, and the excluded values are negative 10 thirds and negative 5.